Right now, you're seeing a lot of outrage over the SBA and their handling of the Paycheck Protection Program, or the PPP. These loans that were meant for small businesses that you might think of as kind of the mom and pop store or maybe the business with 15 to 20 employees, those businesses are having a hard time securing the funding they need to move forward, and instead we're seeing huge companies with massive amounts of payroll, with tons of employees, getting through on kind of technicalities or loopholes and making upwards of 20 million in some case off of these loans that, while they're a business too and they still need money to survive, they wouldn't technically qualify, or you wouldn't associate them normally with a small business. And the businesses that you would think of are looking at maybe closing up shop for good because they can't afford to continue. This whole situation has been brought about by the governments, both federal and local, saying we need to shut these things down for the sake of this virus. We have to slow the spread or flatten the curve. It's a great mindset when you have the hard, difficult decision of deciding basically between grandmas and the economy. Which one do you sacrifice to make sure that we can all move forward together? It's a really tough decision, and there is no good answer. But the programs that they've instituted aren't really a good response either. And that's evident with the news that's coming out. These large companies receiving huge loans and the fund drying up, and these small businesses basically starving because they can't afford to pay themselves, pay their utilities, pay their people. Now, I understand that this was all done with good intention. When you're looking at a crisis at this scale, where basically you are shutting down the economy, you're telling businesses not to operate, it's a really big decision, and it's really tough to figure out what's a good solution for that. This isn't like all these businesses did something wrong, where they were corrupt and they went kind of broke by their own fault. This was a mandated shutdown by government telling these businesses to stop. How do you fix a situation like that? Well, the solution was stimulus and getting these loans back out there into the pockets of these businesses, which is great. If it's a government problem, it's a government solution, and I think we all understand that scenario. And initially, the PPP was seen as this kind of great light at the end of the tunnel for all these businesses that were struggling. The intent was to move quickly, and I don't want to attribute malice to anyone. I don't think anyone intended for the banks to be making a bunch of money or for this money to only go to the large corporations. But when we look at how this was set up, we can see a really clear problem. The SBA, the administration, the government is looking at a situation where they have to distribute money, $350 billion in funds. They have to get that into the hands of the businesses. But they're only a small little institution. They can't process all those applications, all those loans for the entire country. So they're probably looking at it going, let's give this money, let's run it through the banks. Let's have the banks at the local level, they're already working with these businesses, handling loans anyway. Let's run the money through them so they can handle all the processing, all the applications, etc. They'll be the kind of field agents out there on the ground dealing in these local communities so that we don't have to have this huge infrastructure to handle all of this, like application, payments, all this stuff. It's a little bit too complicated. The government doesn't want to handle it. So let's say, let's run it through the banks. They're doing it anyway. That's a good solution. Except it's basically just a middleman. And you can see the outcome of that. Basically, you're giving the choice of who wins and who loses, who's accepted and who's denied to the banks. And that's a big problem. The moment you say, we've shut everyone down, now come to us, come apply, and the banks are able to say, yes, we'll give you money, no, you're sidelined, wait over there, you're last in line because your amount isn't big enough, or you haven't worked with us before, or whatever their reason is for not giving you funding, but giving the big company funding. Now, I believe that almost everybody is pretty good intentioned. There are some evildoers out there, but for the most part, I think people like to do good, but most people are also selfish, especially businesses. Banks are selfish, businesses are selfish, the government's selfish. Everyone is kind of selfish and selfishly motivated to figure out what makes the most sense for us. So when you look at a bank, they're going to do what makes the most sense for them. When you look at a small business or a big business, everyone's kind of looking out for themselves, trying to figure out how do we make this work. So while that's not inherently anyone in that system is doing anything wrong or you're intentionally trying to hurt someone else, their selfishness is what's kind of getting in the way or what ends up becoming the larger problem. And so I think the solution to this was actually relatively simple and still not perfect, but much better than what they went with. Basically, all of these businesses, to even apply for the Paycheck Protection Program, you need to submit IRS forms. They're looking for IRS data that the IRS already has. You just need to prove that that's the forms you have, give it to the bank, and then they say yes or no. And that situation right there is really unfortunate. They get to pick winners and losers. And that's really what feels the most unfair about it, that some big company gets a check and a little company doesn't. Instead, This should have been run through the IRS, just like the individual payments, where people are now getting money right into their bank account. It just shows up. The IRS says, if you qualify for X, Y, and Z, we're going to send you money. And they could have done the exact same thing for these small businesses that are doing the exact same thing. They're filing the IRS forms. The IRS knows how much their payroll is, what all their taxes are, all their health care and unemployment insurance. They have all the information because you have to submit those forms anyway to even apply. So why put the banks in that situation? Why not just run it directly through the IRS? Now, granted, there's going to be problems with that system too, but it's a lot more automated and you don't need to have, like, no matter how big the problem is, we already have the institution to handle it. The IRS is doing that already. They're doing it for individuals. You have way more individuals in this country than you have small businesses, yet somehow we can get money into individuals' bank accounts. We can get them checks. But instead, these small businesses have to apply for loans, which a lot of people are looking at as basically free money because it's forgiven if it goes towards payroll. So instead, do a system through the IRS where there's basically a formula that says if you have less than this many employees, if your payroll is such and such dollars, have some qualifying factors, just like they do for individuals, where they say if you make more than this, then it's, kind of sloped off. If you make less than this, you get the full amount. If you're married, you get this. If you have kids, you have this. You have all these qualifying factors that they already have this information on, and you can run that stimulus directly to the person that it's intended for. I truly believe, or I want to believe, that the government was trying to do the right thing when they're looking at this at a federal level, looking at all the states that are impacted, and different states are handling different problems. So it's a huge, varied problem across the country. But overall, it's been these government mandates locking things down, shutting things down, basically running businesses out. You can't operate in some cases, some of these businesses. And they're saying, we want to get money back to the people, back to the business. How do you do that? Do it directly. Don't have the middleman who's just there filing applications and well, send me your IRS forms. Why not? The IRS already has the information. Why can't we send it directly to the people instead? Send it to the businesses. Is there going to be problems? Are there going to be small holes? Of course. Some businesses that's newly formed, maybe doesn't have all that stuff filed yet. Maybe there's other businesses that might be, they're not paying. If you own the business and you're not paying yourself, how would that be tracked? But in general, just like with the individuals, there's going to be small holes, but those holes are a lot easier to fill and easier to overlook than the huge problem that has come from this Paycheck Protection Program through the Small Business Administration and through the banks. The whole system feels very broken and corrupt. And again, I don't think it's necessarily malice. I think it's just people being selfish. Maybe there's a little greed associated with that, and you can think of that whatever you want, but a lot of people are just kind of greedy. They want to look at it for what's in it for me? How do I make the most of this? And these banks, these businesses, they're doing the same. But yet, a lot of the small businesses that we actually think of as true small businesses get left on the sidelines. So instead, the IRS should have, and still, I still would recommend this to President Trump, to the administration, to the Small Business Administration. Look at this program. Understand that it's broken. Running it through the banks does not make sense. The banks are going to take their cut. They're going to pick winners and losers, and you're going to lose a lot of the small business that's in this country that's there propping things up, keeping things going. Are those small businesses going to inherently use it for payroll to keep people employed? Not necessarily. Those businesses can choose what they want to do with that stimulus that's sent directly to them. Just like the individuals, that stimulus is meant to pay their bills and maybe keep the economy going, but you don't really know how someone's going to spend that money. You just kind of have to assume and trust. You give it to them and hope that they do the right thing or they use it for something good. They don't just gamble it away. Same thing with these small businesses. They might still fire their employees. They might use it for lining their own pockets. But then guess what? That's a problem for that individual business. And you can see specifically that that business is corrupt or that business is not doing the right thing. And the problem and the blame lies there rather than with the SBA and the banks, which is what it currently is. This huge bottleneck, picking winners and losers, just doesn't end up working out in any time that's ever applied. It's thought of like we need to make sure people aren't corrupt. We got to make sure there's no fraud. We got to make sure people don't cheat the system. So we need these people, these managers, these bankers to review these applications and check and make sure that everything is going according to plan. What's intended to prevent fraud and corruption ends up creating it, because then these people who get to pick and choose who wins and loses, they end up deciding where this money goes, and chances are they're going to pick what's in their best interest or what's in the interest of their friends or other businesses that they've already worked with. When you do a formula, a true even formula of just say X, Y, and Z, this qualifies, you get money, there's no choice in that, no subjective decision making where someone gets to pick yes or no. It's just flat, even across the board. And that feels the most fair and most equal. Again, there's gonna be people that fall through the cracks, businesses that it doesn't work out quite right. How do you handle the certain technicalities? That's the problem. This whole problem, like I said before, it's kind of picking between grandmas and the economy. The old people, do we sacrifice them or do we sacrifice the economy? There's no good decision to be made. And just like in this crisis, the response has been very swift, very fast. There isn't a good solution that's going to be perfect. There's always going to be that loophole, always that technicality, but it's a much better system that they're already doing for individuals that they should have done for small businesses to make it a lot more fair and just to ease the burden that's on all these businesses right now. You have people who are basically looking at, like, they still have to pay their utilities, they still have to pay their rent, they're trying to pay their employees, they have people who they have to lay off. Like, it's a really tough situation to be in, especially if you're a business that is looking at the future going, I don't know how I survive. And you might have people out there who say, oh, well, these businesses, these company owners, they should have been preparing for the rainy day. They should have known to set some funds aside in savings. What business could ever have predicted or prepared for a government closure of your business? I don't think that's really fair to put the burden on the business to say you should have prepared. A rainy day is, you have a dip in customers, you have a problem that comes up, you have an expense that you didn't expect, something breaks, you have to fix it. But to plan for your business to be shut down where you're making no money at all and you still have to cover all of your expenses, that's a huge burden that I don't think most people would ever predict or plan for. And so I don't think it's fair to say that, oh, you should have had some money in savings. Yes, that's good advice. You should have had money in savings. But in a situation like this where the mandate has come down that, no, you can't work, or basically maybe other businesses around your business have been shut down and so you have no customers anymore. Maybe you're a business-to-business type company and they've all been shut down. Oh, you're still allowed to run, but you have no clientele anymore. How do you handle that situation? So really, the solution is right. The government should be providing stimulus to these people that they've shut down, shut out of business. But how they went about doing that was totally, I'll still keep saying it was good intentioned. Maybe there's malice behind the scenes. Maybe people are, trying to be corrupt. But really, I don't think that's what ends up happening. I think it's good intentions that end up, they create a system that, while it's meant for one thing and it's designed for one thing, it ends up backfiring and being the complete opposite. The best solution, almost any time, cut out the middlemen, cut out the managers, cut out the people, the qualifiers. If your intent is to get money into the hands of businesses, you can do that through the IRS. They already have the information. They have the forms. They have the ability to, issue refunds and checks. They can do that already with direct deposit, with a physical paper check in the mail. We're seeing that happen with individuals. And the same thing should have, and still, it should have been done in the first place. It should have been run this way to begin with. But now that we've learned the lesson, $350 billion, still not enough. A lot of these companies didn't see a dime. We saw how that worked the first go around. If they're going to fund that more with $250 billion or $500 billion more, however much money more, no matter how much money they throw at the problem, the structure, the process that they put in place was not smart. It was too bloated, too much corruption, too much opportunity for greed and corruption to get in the way. Cut out all that bloat, do it automated through a computer system. Just issue checks directly to the people that you want it to get to. How those businesses spend it, that's on them. They get to decide. And then at a local level, those employees can say, hey, you got a check, but you still laid me off. Now I understand who you are as a business owner. And you don't get to blame the banks. You don't get to blame the government. You blame the business and their management of those funds and those resources. And then it's fair. Equality across the board. Based on a formula, you get a certain amount of dollars issued like that. No applications, no process. Take care of it just like that. And that's really what they should have done. And they still should do moving forward. It worked for individuals, or it's not perfect. There's no perfect 100% like foolproof, bulletproof system, but it's working for individuals. People are getting the money in their account in the mail. Is it taking a little bit of time? Yeah, but it's relatively quick, relatively automated. The IRS has been able to handle all of it. Add the same procedure, qualifying factors, but do the same thing for small businesses, and I think we'd be in a lot better situation.